So I'm very pleased to be joining you this evening for a conversation on human augmentation, blurring the lines between biology and technology. And in thinking about this panel, I was thinking about all the ways that we can augment human capability. And I realized I was thinking about it in the form of the classic model of the human as an information processor. We take in sensory information, we process it, and then we act on it. And we can use technology to augment our capabilities at any point in this human processing loop. And of course, we've been augmenting human capabilities for years. I put a few pictures up here from technology from the last century that we still use to this day. We use binoculars to augment vision. We use computers to augment our cognitive processing. And we use, these are tongs that extend our capability to reach into extreme hot and cold environments. But since then, since the last century, we've had a consumer electronics and computer revolution, and the entire computing power of that computer you saw from World War II now fits in the palm of our hands. So here are a few examples of the next phase of human augmentation from my own work from the past decade. Portable computers and wearable sensors have enabled us to enhance soldier sensory and motor capabilities in the field. The lower left-hand picture is of a soldier wearing a vibrotactile vest that enables him to receive messages that he might not be able to hear or see through the sense of touch. The instrumented glove in the upper left corner shows the same soldier, or gives the same soldier the capability to send signals electronically to another soldier or a robot. And finally, the concept of a cognitive prosthetic is shown here in the form of a young boy with autism and his robot that helps him with social interaction. So tonight, we're going to talk about a new generation of technology to augment human capability. We've gone from devices that we use as tools to sensors that we wear, and tonight, we're going to take it to a whole new level as we talk to several companies who are developing products so advanced that the line between human and technology has blurred. You've already seen some of the demos of these products, so I want to just highlight some of them here and mention some of the key themes for tonight's discussion. To enhance our sensory processing, we have the BioTAC from SynTouch, which illustrates tonight's theme of going from passive to active. They've revolutionized what used to be a passive prosthetic hand to an active one that can sense and adapt to the environment. We'll be hearing from Sonatus shortly, but their soundbite product illustrates the theme of restoring and augmenting through not only helping patients who suffer from hearing loss, but also augmenting natural hearing capacity in challenging sound environments. You saw a Motive demoed upstairs, and they're augmenting cognition through the brain-computer interface. And finally, enhancing our motor capability is exobionics. The exobionics robotic exoskeleton is being used by patients all over the world. And I'm pleased to introduce to you our pilot for the evening, Matt Tilford, who will give us a live demonstration of how far we've come in human augmentation of motor capability. Matt? Another round of applause for Matt. You'll have You'll have a chance to talk with him after the panel this evening, and I hope you'll take that opportunity. So finally, I want to end by introducing a few additional themes that I hope will come out in our discussion tonight. One theme is connectivity and data. All of the devices that we've mentioned can be connected and generate data. The curation of this data will be critically important as we move further down the path of human augmentation. And finally, what are the technical and ethical choices we face as we have a tighter and tighter coupling between humans and technology? Rather than predict the future of technology, we should decide what we want the future to look like and drive towards that. Is it going to be machine-centric, like the Borg Collective, or human-centric, allowing us to share and augment our capabilities in a positive way? And with that, I'd like to introduce our panel. On our panel this evening, we have Shaheen Farshi, a partner in Lux Capital. We have Jeremy Crowell, Director of Central Fabrication from Hosmer Doris Corporation. We have Neil McCaffrey, VP of Engineering for Medical Products, Exo Bionics. And we also have our next speaker, Peter Hadrovich, who's the President of Sonatus Technologies. Peter.
Thank you.
There you go.
So I'm going to talk to you today about a radically unusual product. It is a true story. I'm going to talk to you about the advanced two-way acoustic communicator. It's worn in the mouth, which enables it to be invisible. It's wireless. You don't have to use your ears. It's hands-free. And you can speak in an extremely loud environment and have your voice communicated clearly through a phone or a radio, some other communication device. We're developing this product for some very, very important customers: military, intelligence, and first responders. That may seem like a little bit of a leap right now, but if I do my job correctly, you'll understand how the pieces fit together. Let me talk to you about the origins of the technology. And one theme that I want to emphasize is, I guess, the word important. If you could focus on the word important. Restoring hearing is something that's very important. In 2006, the founder of Sonatus Medical, Amir Abulfati, had a he had a eureka moment where he thought, what if we could solve the problem for people who are deaf in one ear, instead of implanting surgically a device in the mastoid bone, if instead we transmitted sound through the teeth, the most direct pathway to hearing other than air-conducted sound? It was no coincidence that Amir was the VP of R&D for Invisalign, the dental braces, custom dental braces company. And it was no coincidence that Amir was a scuba diver who had lost hearing in one ear and was stumped as to how to solve this problem. Well, let me fast forward through a lot of pain and suffering. Pain and suffering going through the FDA process, developing a custom electronic device that fit in the mouth safely, comfortably, could be worn all day, to perfect the technology that would transmit sound imperceptibly through the teeth, but would capture very high frequency sounds so that individuals could hear especially speech, which is the most important sound. Important sound. Not just for their social purposes, but also for an individual's safety. That's the story of the SoundBite hearing system. Approved by the FDA, accepted and enjoyed by over 1,500 patients. It established a platform for the transmission of sound, again, through the optimal pathway, the most direct route for transmitting high-fidelity sound other than hearing it through the air. So the link to this product I first started talking to you about, the crazy concept of a headset that would clip to your tooth. Well, we asked the question, what are the big communication problems that exist generally, right, that might be solved by this? I can't tell you the whole story, otherwise I might have to, Incutel is an organization that was founded by the CIA to fund technologies that had crossover applications, both commercial, medical, and also served national security. Incutel has been supporting, first within Sonatus Medical, and then Sonatus Technologies as a spin-out company, a platform for communications. That platform has attracted other partners as well, major partners, industry leaders like Panasonic and 3M, because they see the value. They see the value of this technology interface, this communications interface, because it's important. And the importance really comes down to redefining the concept of safety in a connected world. If you are under surveillance or you are trying to operate undercover, detectability becomes a risk. It's something that could endanger your safety. Information security, the ability to transmit wirelessly information without being intercepted. If you're operating in an environment where it's mission critical, the distraction of using your hands, of having apparatus about your head, can endanger your safety. Covering your ears prevents you from hearing your surroundings, which can endanger your safety. Tangles and bulk can limit your freedom of movement. The inability to speak in noise at the most critical moments, burning building, can endanger your safety. And the inability to communicate and wear protective gear, again, can endanger your safety. It's a big problem, but because we're so used to using external interfaces, people don't think of, well, is there an alternative? There is an alternative, and we call it the ATAC system. It's a base layer of communications, a small device almost identical to the one that's accepted by medical device patients that attaches to the tooth. Optimal bone conduction hearing pathway, a noise shielding mic for speaking in extreme noise, and a patch antenna that allows it to interface with virtually any communication device, Bluetooth link. Attached to a phone, linked to radios, or even talk to screen, talk to a computer. Encrypted, always on, hands-free. Supports biometric sensors, collecting data and transmitting that data, again, for the safety of the user. So let's talk a little bit about how our product is designed, this base layer, and the value that it adds. Very quickly, if you are operating in a discrete communications environment, you can imagine the applications. There's a variety of threats that you face. Having a communication system available to you that is addition by subtraction, that eliminates the wires, allows you to operate invisibly. It allows you to operate with encrypted communications. And it allows you to operate hands-free, undetected. If you're a firefighter or a first responder, you experience a variety of threats and challenges in very hostile environments. Noise so loud that you can't hear yourself speak. Fireground communications in an environment of 115 dBs ambient noise. Chemical, radiological, biological threats. The need to communicate is essential. And yet, if you can speak in noise, if you can protect your ears with hearing or not, if you can reduce the weight and bulk of the individual operating in those very challenging environments, and most importantly, if you can wear protective gear required to protect you in those environments, you're safer. That's why companies like 3M and Panasonic see the value in what we're doing. Military applications, tactical communications are essential for the wide variety of threats that these individuals face. For national defense, for surveillance, for a variety of activities, they have to be able to communicate constantly, to have the ability for either open ears for situational awareness, or in very loud environments to wear protection for their ears. They have the communication base layer, and they can apply that protection or not. Speak in noise, this ability to speak in a high noise environment is a super capability that enables them to do things that they otherwise can't, that would endanger their safety. Reduced weight in bulk is a priority. And then, of course, they can use any protective gear with this communication solution. Ultimately, when you look at what goes on top of the base layer, you look at bionic enhancement maybe as the final frontier. The Iron Man suit, some of you may have heard of. But at its core, the most important thing is communication. And our system provides that base layer. So every company has a slide that shows infinite possibilities of all the applications, right? You have to establish your platform and you're going to conquer the world. We do too. But the great thing about ours is we have a strategy to go after the most important users for the most important purposes. And that's why those customers have funded us, because they have a need to communicate in certain situations and in certain environments where they have to communicate in a way where they're undetected, they can use protective equipment, and they have full awareness of their surroundings. And that's why they've been supporting us for so long. That platform that we prove and that we establish, just like the medical device platform that we're leveraging to build our system on top of, enables multiple other applications. These adopters set the gold standard. You look at your elite Navy SEALs. When they adopt a technology, it filters down throughout all the other markets. They seed these expansion markets by their adoption. These customers we've targeted for another reason. When you're important, you get funded. DoD funds are going down. These customers have growing budgets, and they have off-the-shelf purchasing authority. That's a good thing. And then we have a product that's proprietary, and because we have over 40 patents protecting it, it is a sole source product. So we can capture the value that we create for our customers. And then we have the ability to go outside of the United States as well to double our markets. All right, now this is the vision of what the platform can do. The platform as a communication device enables two-way communication. It's also a proven, safe data system for biometric sensors as well. And in that regard, there are a number of applications, whether you're riding on a motorcycle and applying the audio communications technology, or whether you're you're interested in a fitness application that gives you real-time feedback about your performance. This device enables that in a very unique format. And then there are these other applications related to safety as well that swing back into the medical. So detecting illness and giving the feedback to the individual or to the healthcare workers that a patient is requiring care based on certain biological parameters. That's in the future. What we're focused on right now is this fundamental communication application that will keep some of the most important users safer.
Great. Thank you. All right, now we get to the fun part. Not that that wasn't fun. So before we start, I want to remind you that the number to text questions should be up on the slide, 650-308-8522. So text your questions. Also, the Twitter hashtag is also up there, #VLabHA. So feel free to tweet and send us your questions. So I want to start by giving our other panelists a chance to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their companies. And I want to start with Neil. And Exo just went public very recently, so that's really exciting news. So if maybe you could start with that and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for mentioning that. And it is an exciting time at Exo Bionics for that and other reasons as well. I think that as you progress from a company, from a startup as this was, I've joined more recently, but I've been in startups before that. So it's an exciting time to watch that and to progress to the point where you have that level of public confidence and interest that they decide to invest in your company because they see a great future for what you're doing. And on the other side, it really forces you to focus a lot better on not only providing great solutions, but building a really solid business with an idea of the return to shareholders is a key part of the business as you go forward. It's a time for the company to grow up and start to really assess not only the good technology that you're doing, but also to how to commercialize it and make it available to as many people as possible.
Great, thanks. And Jeremy, so your company has been around for a long time and has grown successfully and is a successful private company.
Yeah, yeah. We've actually been around since 1912 doing manufacturing in California. And currently in the building that we're located in now, just down the road in Campbell, we've been there for 50 years this year. So at this point, we're coming up on 103 years of doing business in California. Our parent company has just this year been in business for 100 years. So in our small field of orthotics and prosthetics, I would say that we've been around for a very long time and want to continue to be to the next 100 years.
And last but not least, we have Shaheen and from Lux Partners, or Lux Capital. And Lux is known for backing entrepreneurs with big ideas. Tell us a little bit more about that.
Sure. We haven't quite been around for 100 years, but we hope to. We're a venture capital firm. We've been around for 14 years. We started in the height of the first dot-com bubble with the expectation that the next wave in great companies are going to be based on innovations in basic technology, quote-unquote nanotechnology at the time. We've since invested in almost 50 companies. We have $350 million under management. Current fund is a $250 million fund. And we invest in everything ranging from therapeutics to semiconductors to space technologies. We've done surgical robotics, 3D printing, 3D scanning, drones, general purpose AI, machine learning. So we emphasize three things. We look for great entrepreneurs with big ideas. We look for businesses that can turn into billion-dollar companies. And we look for some kind of competitive advantage that's enabled by some kind of technology or idea. We like to invest where capital is scarce and barriers are high, so we're not going to invest in the 50th messaging app or the 20th ride-sharing app. We look for companies that are transformational, that can make the world a better place, and hopefully also turn into great businesses.
So let me build on that, and I think 2 out of the 3 companies up here have not taken VC funds, right? I mean, Exo has had some VC funds.
But limited. We started and we've bootstrapped from government funding sources, and then also from angels and some larger institutions, but some limited now.
Yeah, so I'm wondering, where's the disconnect? So, I mean, Jeremy, for example, you've been around for 100 years, never needed to take VC funds, ever tried? What?
That's probably above my pay grade to actually know that, but I know that our parent company now is a family business, and they started off, now they're currently in the 4th generation. And at one point, they were a public company that their branch, it was kind of a hostile takeover, their branch got sold off, and the family actually bought the company back. So they've tried to contain it as a family business through all these years.
Okay. Well, Peter, what about you? I mean, you guys have taken in some investment, but not VC, right?
So Sonitus Medical was VC funded. We were spun out of Sonitus Medical. We've got institutional investors, and we just started fundraising. So the question you raise is actually something that we just launched our fundraising, and I love what Shaheen just said, because that's the way I think too, right?
Yeah.
And I think the way our company thinks. And so, where you have an alignment, between the investor and the entrepreneurs and the team focused on it, you can have a good fit. I think what you're scratching at is this a good fit for VC, right?
Right, is the field of human augmentation, do we have potential for a billion-dollar company? Shaheen, what do you think?
If you would have asked VCs probably 10, 15 years ago if there's a billion-dollar company in electric cars, the answer probably would have been no. Will there be a billion-dollar company around sending satellites into space? Probably not. So I think it would be the wrong logic, I guess, process to say, is this space a fit for VC? Versus, for example, looking at an entrepreneur with a vision, with sort of the tools that are available at the time that can enable the business with a modest amount of capital over a 5 to 7 year kind of time frame, really build an asset and build a growing business around, unless you're doing something like therapeutics, which are totally different. The types of companies that VCs today may not view as VC backable may actually be VC backable when we look back 10 years from now and say, wow, did we miss that? So I would say that, again, it goes back to the entrepreneur, it goes back to the tools and assets that are available at the time, it goes back to the vision. And I think looking at investing in terms of what's VC backable and what's not VC backable is the equivalent of, I would say, trailing indicators.
Yeah. Well, let's think about some of those market drivers that our innovators up here have looked at. And Neil, I wanted to start with you. Now that the company's public, I mean, you really do have to answer. Market drivers are now sort of what's going to drive your company. So I'm interested to see how that's changed both the culture and also the business strategy.
Again, I'm new to the company itself, so I don't know the culture beforehand, other than what I've
Right.
learned. But I would say that the focus on satisfying unmet needs is just more amplified there. You have to be a bit more stringent about the products that you do. You're still a leading technology company, so you are still taking risks. But I think what you're doing is you're looking after the right market applications, and you're looking for things that will affect, have the greatest effect on people or affect the greatest number of people, I think is probably a good way to say it.
Okay. What about you, Peter? I know you guys have, in terms of thinking about what are your market drivers and what markets you've chosen and why.
Right. So we look at unmet need, number one, and the importance of that unmet need. So, and then we look at customers that will enable us to build a business around it. And you look back on that InQtel relationship and the relationships, even independent of InQtel, that we formed. that really kind of formed the heart of our business strategy, which is users that are dependent on communications for their safety or for critical missions that don't have the equipment to do what they need to do and will pay a high price to do it and are funding us to do that was a great indicator for us. Then we look beyond that core market, and there's an enormous need for an alternative interface for communications that was validated basically by the customers and then by the companies that serve those customers like 3M. And so that was sort of the kernel that gave us the business justification. And then our business strategy is we use existing commercial pathways, existing distribution channels, and we partner with the industry leaders so that we can do it very capital efficiently. We have Panasonic's a manufacturing partner. 3M is a distribution partner. We use existing technologies. We integrate off-the-shelf technologies, again, patent protected, but that's how we do it. That's how we do it efficiently.
Okay. And can you just talk a little bit more about how you made the transition from a technology that didn't just restore function, but augmented it? I mean, you started to talk about that in terms of the markets. I mean, those seem to be two different markets.
They are, and so that was, the initial question was, there's an obvious advantage to be able to receive communications without being detected, and that was essentially the medical device platform. It's relatively easy to adapt that platform to receive communications. The extremely high value application that was not available, it was really just a concept, which was, how do we put a microphone in that same device and have it work in the field perfectly? Now, we haven't done it yet, but we did it well enough that we've received more investment, and we built prototypes that proved it. And I'll tell you, it was a surprise to us how well it worked. The first demonstration we did was at a fire tower, Foster City Fire Tower, demonstrating in front of a group of about 20 firefighters. Every one of those firefighters couldn't believe what they had seen demonstrated. And they all said, this is one of the greatest things that could happen to our industry, because our number one problem is communication in fire-ground situation. Well, no one would ever know that, because you're not going out polling firefighters, hey, what's your biggest problem? And they might not think to tell you, because they just assume that it's impossible. And so that single development, the microphone embedded into the two-way device, was the link, and that's what Incutel made the bet on. And based on that bet, now we have a platform.
Gotcha. And I want to come back to the restore and augment with you, Neil, but you just started a whole other thread with platform technology, which I think really goes to Jeremy. So now I'm torn. Who do I go to first? Let's go with the restore and augment, and then we'll build on the platform. So because I'd really like you to speak to that as well. Yeah, please.
Well, what we're trying to do, necessity is the mother of all invention. So a lot of our patients will actually come to us and tell you what they need. And currently, right now, with what we're very excited about is our microprocessor-controlled foot. And being in Silicon Valley now, we've been able to adapt apps into the foot, so the patient actually is in control of their resistance settings. They're simple changing your shoe. You're able to change that heel height on your phone, so you don't need to come into a prosthetist or any of my other colleagues out there and say, well, I have a special activity I want to do. I want to go hiking in the mountains. How can I adapt to this? They actually can adapt to it with their phone now.
So is that a traditional view of augmentation, taking into 21st century technology, or is that pushing augmentation?
Well, right now, we are one of about 3 or 4 companies that are trying to advance that technology right now. What we really find amazing in comparison to the other companies out there is the actual active range of motion that we have. A patient's foot doesn't just move a little bit, it moves a lot. One of our feet out there have 50 degrees of plantar flexion, downward motion. Ours, with our microprocessor foot, has 18 degrees of downward motion, 10 degrees of upward motion. We can lock the foot out because one of the, you find this out from your patients. say they're right below the knee amputee and they're trying to drive. Well, if you have a hydraulic foot and you leave it open, they're going to have the fastest Hyundai on the road right now. So you definitely want to be able to lock a lot of these little things that you just find out as you're going on.
And I just want to follow up on the connected foot for a moment, because I think we talked a little bit about data and where that data can go.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell a little bit about that.
So what we've just really kind of started launching, it's still in our beta version, but is data acquisition from the foot going into your computer via Bluetooth that we have it set up right now, because one of our biggest problems is this technology, how is it going to get paid for? Well, in this day and age, everything gets paid for by insurance companies, but insurance companies are pulling back the reins right now. So we have to justify and document everything. So with data acquisition, a patient can come in one day and they're walking only, say, 1,000 steps per day. Well, now that patient can come back a month from now, and then you can go in to pull that information off the foot and say, wow, now they're walking 10,000 steps a day. So there's justificational need and efficacy that your foot is actually promoting that patient's well-being. Gives
a whole new meaning to the Internet of Things. So Neil, let me bring it back to you and back on the theme of restoring and augmenting, because again, EXO obviously embodies some of that in terms of the future. And so talk a little bit about those market segments, and have they blurred, or?
They do blur, but they do have specific segments. I think when you do have a leading technology, and I think that this is at the very beginning, all of these topics that we're talking about today, and the whole idea of bionics. Our company was founded with a mission of enhancing human capability with human exoskeletons. It's a very broad topic, and the nice thing about that is when you do have a good base technology, what we do is apply to people with all abilities the ability to enhance that. What we were able to see today, and Matt was so great to come down and show you guys, was the ability to provide ambulatory mobility to people that have lower limb weakness or paralysis. What we are doing, and you can see these on our websites, are pretty amazing things with our warfighter, where we're enhancing their capabilities to give them super abilities. Down the road, you can easily see this in industrial applications where very specific actions can be enhanced through not the machinery itself, but it's the melding of the human and the machine together. So we're not trying to replace a robot. We're trying to find things where a human can do its job better with that exact integration of technology with humans.
And Shaheen, in terms of this issue of restoring versus augmenting, or again, as we've talked about it, blurred, where do you think the investment, what do you see as the sexy piece for investment?
So I like to follow where the money is. And so if there's more money in the augmentation, fantastic, we're all about it. Or the other way around. Either way, we don't, discriminate. I would say that there is certainly a lot more of a market opportunity in augmentation. Humans have been augmenting themselves since they got up on their 2 feet, I guess, by using rocks and sticks, maybe thousands or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of years ago. We're all augmented in this room. I'm wearing glasses. I mean, that's augmentation. And so finding ways to, I would think that every single consumer product out there is a form of human augmentation. It's helping us be more efficient in our daily lives. They're helping us look better. They're helping us communicate better. And so I would say that human augmentation probably represents a larger market opportunity, and VCs love big markets. In terms of restoration, it's certainly a huge need. And I think there is obviously larger dollar amounts on a per kind of device or per system basis in that market. Which market is bigger? I would assume that the augmented portion is probably bigger. But we're always open to both kind of areas depending on level of disruption and obviously the size of the opportunity.
Let's talk a little bit about barriers. barriers to innovation in this field, human augmentation, I think you end up squarely in regulatory paths like the FDA, for example. So maybe Peter, you can start, because I know you've actually managed to turn regulatory to an advantage, and which I think to many of us who have gone through the regulatory process, especially as innovators, that's a unique experience.
4 years ago, I hated the FDA. Today, not so much, because I'm offering a communication product that has been validated by the FDA. And it is a gauntlet to get, for a medical device company to get a device approved, even one like the soundbite that was a 510K, which means you can leverage a prior approval and say, we're just like this prior approval, and therefore we should have an expedited pathway. I have to tell you, it was a real gauntlet. Many, many years, clinical studies, even for this accelerated pathway. So it was a barrier. For us now, though, we say for any, essentially a commercial or a customer looking to use our product, they say, well, is it going to be comfortable? Is it going to be safe? Is it effective? How do I know all those things? I say, well, FDA, and then, everybody understands. So for us, it does, I think it can cut negatively for some companies. For us, lately it's been an advantage.
Neil, what about for you?
I would concur in a great deal with that. In my previous jobs, I've worked with clearing Class 3 medical devices, which are very difficult to do with lots of surveillance and things like that. I think when it comes down to it, you look at the actual agency, the federal, the FDA itself, and it goes through cycles, and it's going into a cycle of a bit more helpful, a little bit more streamlined, which is nice. But there's the agency itself, and then there is what it does. And I think I would agree that what it does is it allows you to make a very safe and effective product using what everybody should be using as engineers, good practices. And if you follow those good practices, you should do it in any product that you do.
That's right.
And I think this just levels the playing field and makes sure that the products that are cleared are safe and effective. And I think that's a good thing in itself, by itself.
Okay, so FDA question, not so exciting, apparently. No one here wants to, important, but not so exciting. So maybe we can take it up a notch and, talk about, Jeremy, your company has innovated over the past 100 years. You started off with a very passive prosthetic device. You're now on a connected foot.
Yeah.
So, what's next? Do people ask you that? Do you guys dream about it?
The sky's the limit, really. What Nathaniel's doing here at ESCO is really one of the big things that everybody's asking about, because the media has thrown a lot of attention to it. We in the prosthetic industry, a lot of our patients are not people that can use some of these real high-end products. A lot of our patients are 70-year-old diabetics. But the patients who do need these products, we need to keep pushing that technology to be able for them to adapt. 5 years ago, when I started with this company, we came out with our first carbon fiber foot. At this point now, we have 12 different carbon fiber foots adapted for all different patients, because every single patient has a different need. Most exciting is a lot of our sport feet. A lot of people see Oscar Pistorius out there, sprinting, and then I have a 60-year-old lady come in and say, am I going to be able to do what he did? Well, were you able to do what he did before when you had both your legs? Probably not. But what you can do now is let's get you just back to normal mobility. But like that being said, that's we're really pushing our raised microprocessor foot right now, is just to be able to have it for anybody who needs that capabilities.
Now, all three of you have really platform technologies, and you can build on them with new sensors, with other connectivity. Peter, let's start with you. What would be the next obvious way to expand that platform? Would it be in the sensing capability? Would it be in kind of the active?
Well, I'll tell you.
Yeah.
I'll tell you exactly. So you have a two-way communication device. used by very important users on very important missions. So you're worried about their condition even when they're not communicating with you. So we can take a accelerometer, very, very small, very, very low power, and put it into the device and track real-time activity, body position, whether there's been a head trauma, and now we have real-time reporting. And it's just it seems like such a simple thing, and from an engineering standpoint, it actually is relatively simple to integrate that. A little more complicated to transmit the data constantly, but we can do that. And now you've got a capability that essentially gives real-time reporting on one of those individuals. Think of the fireman in a burning building. You want to know, is he lying down, standing up? Has he been hit in the head? All of those things. So that's an incremental step, I think, as sensors become more, they become smaller and more efficient, then those capabilities can be expanded on the sensing side.
What about security and privacy of the data?
Security and privacy of the data for us is paramount, and we do that straight out of the box. So all of our communication links are encrypted.
Yep. And Jeremy, I know you've already dealt with that in terms of reimbursement, and the data is accessible by third parties, privileged third parties.
Once we send that off to them, but just to kind of expand what Peter's saying, in our foot, for instance, we do have an accelerometer in it. We also have a Hall's effect sensor. We also have a gyroscope. So we're constantly getting that feedback from that foot at, I think it's 1,000 times per second right now. And to get that foot to operate the way it does, now we have 27,000 lines of code. So the amount of information that you're getting just from, to say something as simple as walking is just astronomical.
Yeah. And Neil, I wanted to switch gears a little bit and ask.
I'm sorry, before you switch gears, sorry to interrupt.
Sure.
But
right
I would dare to say that maybe we don't know what the big applications that can leverage these platforms are today.
Yeah.
Who would have known? I mean, people were building accelerometers back in the 80s for spacecraft.
Right.
Who would have known that they're going to be used to orient portrait versus landscape on point-and-shoot cameras, and then be used to measure how many steps you walk, for example, during the course of your day on your wristband, for example? Who would have known?
Right.
I think nobody would. They would have said, oh yeah, we're going to use this on missions to Mars, and then to missions to other galaxies. That's what people would have thought the future applications of gyros and accelerometers would have been 20 years ago. Maybe we don't know what the Sinitis. Maybe if we fast forward into the future, there's going to be a use case for the Sinitis device that we probably, if we spend hours in this room, probably wouldn't even think of. If you would have asked somebody again back in the 90s what a smartphone would be good for, in lieu of Facebook and Uber and email, they would have been absolutely worthless. And so I think we're kind of maybe getting ahead of ourselves when we ask ourselves, what are these platforms good for? And we probably don't know the answer, and probably will never know the answer. And for another 10, 15 years probably.
Right, and I think that part of the point that I made in my opening remarks is that you can't predict the future, but you need to envision the future and drive toward it, right? So, and I think that was actually where I wanted to go with Neil, which is, you have these pathways. You have these medical exoskeletons, which are, again, this theme of restoring function, and you're also augmenting function. But in some ways, you guys have an opportunity here to envision the future of, augmenting all humans, and so, how do we drive toward that rather than being responsive to the market?
I think there's a lot of ways to do that. I would add also there's a third thing that we are looking at, and that's extending performance. If you can use a device that will allow you to play tennis until you're 90, or there's lots of things that can be done other than, it's a form of augmentation, but just to extend what you can be doing for a longer period of time, I think is an important thing to say. And when you do this, you are sitting on a very broad platform. It can be used. It's probably something that drives towards ubiquity. And what you have to do is you take that lead and you work with the right partners. I think strategic partnering is a good thing. I think understanding all the applications that you can get comes from making it a bit more open and understanding a gyroscope can be used by Apple and things like that. So partnering is a big part to that. Making sure you have a really broad platform technology that we work with people to understand, working with clinicians. Our device was when we started our medical device, it was very much focused on spinal cord injuries. And what we started to learn was we can then, what our goal at the beginning of our clinical product is to restore function. And in cases where we have traumatic brain injuries, and now where we've learned we're getting a lot of very good feedback from stroke, what we're trying to do is restore gait. We're trying to get the gait to be perfect, and that's something where we can rehabilitate with devices to do that. With people who have, paraplegia, quadriplegia, at this time it's a chronic disease. There's not a restorative function, but there's the function of restoring is to make that a useful device for life. And so there's all different ways of looking at restoring functions, and for some people there's that rehabilitative case. And you learn that when you start working with clinicians and finding new applications that you didn't know, that weren't very apparent to begin with.
I think if you look at society, I don't know how many of you watch Boardwalk Empire, but if you watch that show, you'll notice that the way people interact with objects and tools around them isn't a whole lot different from today, except those tools do a lot more. Nucky has this watch that he pulls out of his pocket and he looks at the time. Today, he would have pulled out his cell phone and checked his stocks and checked his favorite sports teams and emailed his buddies and sent a few Snapchats, for example, over to his friends. There's horse-drawn carriages earlier in the show, and then there's cars, and today there is cars, but today's cars, they have cruise control and all these wonderful features, and they're a lot cheaper. And so I think over time, a lot of what today probably is limited to, a few patients will be available to all patients who have weakness or disabilities. So we probably won't be seeing wheelchairs, 20 years from now. The same way we probably aren't seeing as many, for example, metal braces in the age of Invisalign today. So I think we're not going to be, these piped and infrared laser, whatever based, type things like the Borg drones, for example, that we see on TV, will probably look and behave 100 years from now a lot like we do today. But maybe nobody's going to be wearing glasses, and maybe there'll be devices that are super non-invasive that can help us, hear things without having to wear headsets, and not have to put a phone up to our ears, and be able to communicate with our eyeball with blinking. I don't know. I mean, it'll be far less invasive. It'll be far more ubiquitous, and people will live longer and be playing tennis when they're 130 years old, and hopefully nobody will be wearing glasses either. So anyway, but we won't be a whole lot different. All I'm saying down the road.
Yeah, Peter, you wanted to add to that?
Yeah, I think one thing that is perhaps a way to advance it is to create a platform that enables human interaction to riff on what you've developed. If you look at what happened with the iPhone, I mean, Shaheen knows probably more about apps than all of us put together, right? Because it was a platform that enabled that. And I think if technologies are built in a way that the humans actually can help drive the innovation, that's, I think, one way to build the platform. That's something we try and do.
Right. Well, I think we're going to move to audience questions. Let's see. I'm getting some audience questions onto my iPad here. Whoops. All right. I'm going to read two questions. Let's see. And Neil, let's see. We'll start with you. Do you foresee a future where restoring lost abilities has advanced to such a degree where people currently considered to have normal function will be considered impaired? And I think that's a great follow-up to the discussion we were just having. So why don't you?
The idea that the norm will be elevated because of this, I think that is shown in many other things you could imagine with a smartphone. You now have access to all sorts of data that you would dance circles around 1970s guy. Who would have to reach for their encyclopedia or whatever, find a payphone, whatever that is. So it's already happening in those
Right.
fields. So if we were to take it on an exoskeleton basis, it's a big possibility. I think that just to reference back, I think, when we look at mobility now, the idea of getting out of the clinic and now taking people with chronic mobility problems and providing them something that gets them so they can walk freely around without worrying about obstacles, without worrying about, upsets and things like that. I think that's an ability that gives them something that is better than the predicate, we'll say, which is the wheelchair, which is a fantastic and pretty low-cost option, but there are limitations. So getting them to do that, and then, of course, making it as ubiquitous as possible, putting it exoskeleton such that it's under the clothes so that it's not noticeable, I think is something. And then it's just a matter of mechanics and programming to give that super ability. So I'd say I can see a world where everybody would have super abilities.
So if Shaheen was willing to fund an exoskeleton that would turn us all into Olympic athletes, how long would it take us to get there?
I would say that you should see some of our videos on some of our military applications. I think that some of the things we're doing right now, we are taking things like load transfer, transferring the load from what's on the human frame onto an exoskeleton frame has been proven. We have right now in test trials, we have increasing the speed of the warfighter by increasing their running efficiency, and they're running pretty good 5K times right now. So I'd say it's already there, but always be interested in taking that further. I'd like to see a 20-foot pole vault, that's for sure.
To expand kind of on what Neil was saying, what was really originally what they're doing right now was kind of invented back in the 1960s in Canada, called an RGO, reciprocating gait orthosis. And at that point, all we were looking to do is just get the patient to stand. That's it, stand hands free. And that was a major, major accomplishment. Well, now look where we are now. We saw a patient walk out here, turn around, walk right back. So it's going by leaps and bounds.
And I think it's just accelerating more so. I mean, this is a great time to be an engineer because of the convergence and the nexus of data, high-speed computing, wearable computing. And all these things have come together. It's, we don't invent in a vacuum. And I think, we're at a good time right now where this is the thing that can be done.
Shaheen, I'm going to direct this next one to you, and then the other panelists can jump in. What is the current size of the market and proportion among government, industry, healthcare, and what would be advice for entrepreneurs, where to look for the best opportunities?
Wow, so so what is the size of the market for healthcare products? I mean, I would think that first of all, there are different, I think there's different types of markets for different types of solutions. If you're talking about a cure for cancer, well, that market is gigantic. If you're talking about a cure for Ebola, that market is tiny. You should always look at things differently. If you are looking to build a technology or an asset like a drug that has an obvious large market opportunity where just bringing it out to market just introducing something will create a business for you, then it's pretty much a no-brainer. But it's a very long and arduous and difficult process given the FDA discussion that we had earlier. My advice to entrepreneurs would be not to underestimate the cost of productizing and marketing a product. Just because a product is advertised to do certain things doesn't mean that consumers will instantly buy in. I would say that the vast majority of the products that we buy today, we buy at zero risk to us. We buy knowing that we can return. First of all, we watch our neighbors and our friends, buy the product and try it out. We watch the press write about it, and then we buy it. And in most cases, even after going through all those steps, we buy it with the expectation that we can give it back if we don't like it. So as an entrepreneur, I would strongly encourage you to think about how, with scarce capital, you can convince the market to try it out. And you can make the case that it really does do what it's advertised to do. But then again, this doesn't quite apply to the healthcare application where you're marketing a health benefit, in which case you are dealing with the FDA, which presents a whole new different set of challenges. So I would say that don't underestimate the challenges associated with not just developing a new technology, but also productizing and marketing that product.
So I think that's a great segue into the next question, which has to do, again, with regulation. And despite the love fest we had up here for the FDA, you have to admit that innovation moves faster than the regulatory process. So, the question is, what are the ethical and moral considerations for augmentation as technology continues to outpace regulation? Peter, let's start with you on that one.
I think that the FDA has a very important mission that if they did not perform their functions, we'd all be very sad. I think that they have a very difficult job. I think, as Neil pointed out, there are cycles, and we're going through a cycle. And I think those ethical considerations get played out based on the risk and the need. I think over time, so within the healthcare realm, within medical realm, I think that gets played out within the FDA, and I don't think there's a lot of risk. There is as much risk there. I think the ethical considerations come when it's outside of the regulatory regime. Mm-hmm. You're not trying to solve a medical problem, because if you're not, then the FDA you're not making a medical claim, then you're outside that realm.
Well, let me push on that a little bit, and maybe, Jeremy, you have some thoughts here. What I've seen is that people dumb down their products to avoid the FDA. And so the question is then, are we doing ourselves an ethical disservice, by avoiding the FDA and not actually hitting that head on when we know we have technology that's already outpaced it?
Yeah, I would say definitely they're doing themselves a disservice. I mean, not only to themselves, but let's look at our end user here. That's who's really getting the disservice. You put out that technology, exploit it, that it's the best thing since sliced bread, and then the patient gets on it or starts using it and tries to use it, and it goes by the wayside. In this industry, there's constantly a new wave of new products coming out there. A lot of them have stayed, but twice as many of them as went by the wayside because they just didn't prove to be that beneficial to the patient.
Right. Right. Shaheen, have you seen that in working with mobile technology that people are actually sort of skirting regulation and changing their markets just so they don't have to deal with
So
that?
none of our companies have fortunately have had to kind of change their strategy to avoid regulatory issues. But I think it's always wise, especially as a venture-backed company, to try your best to turn as many cards as you can with the minimum amount of capital. And normally going through the whole regulatory process is an expensive process. So if you can de-risk the technology or enter a market, show that you have a marketable product by going after, again, a different market by changing the claims that you're making, then I think that would be a smart path to go down, in my opinion.
And we constantly run into that, especially in California. We're constantly jumping through hoops for regulatory. We are a ISO 9001 certified company, which kind of gives us the stamp of approval internationally. But then all of a sudden you need to be CE marked, and then you need this regulation and that regulation, and the money involved in that is very extreme.
I find a lot of times regulations, of course, are a speed limit. There's going to be people that would like to go faster than that. But I find, especially when it comes to compliance and ethics, you find that most people want to build, very good products. I find, in my career, I've never seen where you limit technology and innovation because of a regulatory thing. I think the one thing that I think is evolving is to sharing data, and in a lot of cases, Americans are held back from getting healthcare innovations because sometimes in that cycle, that period of time, it's much easier to release a safe product in Europe or something like that. And there's lots of examples of that, and I think that where you're starting to hear now, where the ability to use clinical trials from wherever they're done in an FDA filing is going to make that thing a little bit better. But so I think I personally have not heard of anybody saying, well, if we just hold back on it, we'll get through a little bit quicker. You know, especially, and again, with the 510K process, there's a new process where it's much easier to be that predicate device, to do a de novo filing, where it was a little bit more onerous to be the leader. I think it's become a little bit easier to be that leader. So.
Consumer health, too. Consumer health has sort of been the migration out from under the umbrella of regulation. And I think what you can see is a wide variety of wearable health monitoring parameters, giving feedback, which the individual can do with what they want, will prove the value and further develop that data collection that then can be moved back under a regulatory regime. So in some ways it helps, because you go out, you proliferate the technology, you create infrastructure, you create methods of capturing it, you may understand more about the data, and then you can bring it through the regulatory process.
Yeah. We've all seen the trend of technology, to some extent, paving the way for deregulation and the lowering of these kinds of barriers. We saw it, in broadcasting, where you only had probably 3 networks, and then Fox became, I guess, number 4, and then there were a bunch of cable operators, and then suddenly the whole thing was open, and now today with the internet, anybody can broadcast a show on YouTube or Vimeo or name your vehicle. We saw that with telecommunications, and with healthcare, as technology progresses, and as there is going to be an ability to more easily monitor the efficacy and the safety of products, then we may get to the point where the FDA is viewed as the, whatever regulatory commission existed for broadcasting in the past. Part of that is also because of the huge fixed costs associated with, building, a broadcasting station, for example, a broadcasting network back in the day. Same thing, for building a safe drug today. That may not be the case. Maybe developing a safe drug 40, 50 years from now will be so low and so easy to vet that we won't have these kinds of concerns and issues that we're talking about today.
Okay. Well, we've had a couple questions about who will pay for these technologies, as newer technologies, Medicare, self-pay. How is reimbursement going to be a challenge as we move forward? Neil,
I was just going to mention that. We've been focusing on the regulatory barriers. And you look at when you do start a new medical company or a medical technology, the healthcare economics have to play a role in it. You could be solving an incredible issue. You could be doing some incredible technology. But I think when you have that healthcare economics, you see people you want to talk about people that might be a bit more tech averse or worried. It's getting payers in any country is to show that healthcare benefit both to the payer as well to the patient. The health benefits are pretty clear to show. You got to show some economic benefits, and that takes a significant amount of work. I mean, it takes a lot more clinical work.
I think Neil is touching on a very good point. There's a bit of a chicken and egg problem, because you have to, before you can market your product, you have to make the case over a large population of people that there is a tangible, measurable benefit that far outweighs the cost of the technology. So how do you get there, again, without being able to market the product broadly? So therein lies the challenge of a lot of these device companies.
Yeah, we ran into that immediately, to have something as simple as having an ankle joint. Okay, well, everybody's going to want that back. You want that ankle motion back when you're walking. But what we find out is you got to throw millions of dollars at it to get that R&D started, then to start promoting your product, then to get the insurance companies and the doctors and the physical therapists and everybody on board before you start seeing that product getting out there.
Yeah.
That's before you do your first sale. All of that is before your first sale.
So you're down in a deep, deep hole before you can start crawling out of it.
So now we're going to switch gears again, because we're getting some interesting questions. I think finally, people are going to start poking at some where we want to go with implantables. Has anyone here seen the movie Hedwig and the Angry Inch? Has anyone seen that? Do you remember with the implantable cell phone in the tooth? And I thought of you. So the question here is, do you believe plastic surgeons will soon start to implant smarter things into people than silicone? So, and Peter, I'm going to start with you because I have to say, when I saw, the soundbite, I immediately thought of the Hedwig implantable cell phone that in the movie was misfiring. So it was a little bit of a problem.
I want to assure you our device is completely removable. Yeah, I can see it. I mean, I think you'll start with implantable devices for treating medical conditions, look for treating depression. I mean, there's a lot of, that line goes, further and further out. I think it's inevitable. I also think there's a natural aversion to, in any way, penetrating your outer layer. And I think that's just a natural instinct and barrier that's going to maybe keep a little rationality on things.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think there'd have to be a good case to the person that would get an implantable to show some benefit for going over that barrier. Like you say, I think that, you can imagine all sorts of things from being discreet to having some better ability, but, it's still that same interface. It's still trying to do something more. And going internal, you have some benefits to other sensors or signals that you wouldn't get from the outside. But there'd have to be a case made, at least for me personally. So.
And we, primarily are doing external prosthetics, not internal prosthetics. But I remember when I came into this field 20 years ago, and they were talking about regeneration of limbs and limb salvage, which we've made leaps and bounds in that. But still, I don't think, as far as I'm concerned, I thought my job might only lasted, a couple of years, and then there's going to be no external prosthetics anymore. Well, we're still a long way away from that yet.
Well, and just following up on that, over the past 20 years, as you've seen this change in prosthetics, how have you seen the patient respond to these changes?
I mean, dramatically. Us as prosthetists, we're constantly trying to get that patient to walk without any determining factors of them saying, well, there's an amputee right there. And I'd say in the last 20 years, the last 10 years have made an extreme change. If somebody's wearing a pair of pants or something, you wouldn't know if that person's an amputee or not. So we've gained a lot of ground in that way. And with the Pistorius, again, to throw his name out there, when he went in the Olympics, there was questions if he had an unfair advantage. Well, us in the prosthetics community, that's great. Have that fight because that patient really wants to be put in that spectrum.
I think you also start to see where the best candidates would be, and it would be probably for exoskeletons or things like that work just as well outside as inside. And if you're looking for replacing or enhancing or augmenting an internal organ, you start to look at some of the new technologies on insulin pumps or things like that. You might imagine those might be first candidates for that sort of thing.
Yeah.
I feel like as if technology just gets obsolete so quickly that the notion of implanting, doing something permanent to ourselves that is linked to a certain generation of a technology is hard to imagine. I don't know if anybody read about the story of the technology enthusiast who injected Oyster cards, which is the London rail system, RFID chipped into his hands, and then 2 years later they changed their system entirely and those implants were useless. So I have a hard time believing that we will be implanted, but then again, I mean, who would have thought we'd be vaccinating ourselves 100 years ago? So maybe I'm completely wrong, and we will be putting chips, maybe babies will be having chips implanted everywhere when they're born, who knows?
Well, they're even doing that on animals now. Cats and dogs, they have a chip in their back. How far is that going to be before they're going to be asking us to do it? And then there'll be a huge fight and a discussion about that.
So I'm from the East Coast, but we've been hearing a lot about this Google contact lens. So I'd be interested in hearing your thoughts. I mean, that's kind of getting close to, not quite an implantable, but certainly a fairly invasive augmentation. Shaheen, any thoughts on?
Yeah, I know Babak personally. He's a very smart guy. I've been following his work since he was at the University of Washington, and it's really interesting work. The questions are, how do you power the thing? Okay, well, you have to wear maybe a coil or glasses with a coil in the glasses that would power the lens. But well, if you're wearing glasses, then why bother with the lens? So there's a lot of practical issues still associated with it, but it's really interesting technology. And who knows, maybe there's going to be plenty of applications in the military that may trickle down to mainstream applications, which we may not even know of today.
What and I think a lot of us are facing this in the market. What happens if the military applications completely supersede our ability to serve the populations that we may have started with? How do we handle that? I mean, ethically and morally. And sorry, I didn't direct that to anyone, but
So,
it's
I mean,
just
yeah,
thinking
I was
aloud.
actually thinking about this earlier.
Yeah.
My first kind of thought about human augmentation was, would this turn humanity into sort of two groups of kind of haves and have-nots? Will there be the people who have these superhuman abilities that can jump 10 feet and run 20 miles an hour and not eat and not have to sleep, versus everybody else that has to and is just fundamentally inferior? I would say that, based on pattern recognition, we still haven't seen that yet. I mean, there's many people in this neighborhood that have private jets, and I still fly a coach. But there may be a day when we'll all have access to that kind of convenient travel. Because back in the day, people were, riding horses and riding, ships, while some people were on trains, and later were on planes, and it took some time for society as a whole to catch up. But on average, what was available to the extremely rich probably 20 years prior became available to everybody at some point. And so, the rising tide eventually was floating all boats. And I don't think it's any different in this field.
I think it's important that, all through history, the first person who had the bronze sword, had an advantage for a period of time. And, I think that, our military side is developing things for very special purposes. The person who breaches the door, needs a lot of equipment, but also needs bulletproof, so we have those sorts of things. And so, it's hard not to apply it if you have it. And I think you do get an advantage for some period of time. And so it's...
And with us, there is always a moral issue that I constantly face, that I look at a patient, I know what they need, I know what they want, and then all of a sudden I got to say, well, can I see your insurance card? Sorry, you're not going to get that. And that's awful, but it's something that we have to do. Otherwise, you can just watch our business plummet if we're giving out stuff for free. So it's a really tough situation that we're in right now.
Allocating technology is one thing, just in terms of however you cut those equities. But I think ultimately it comes down to what the mission is. You're augmenting a human for what purpose? So, what is the purpose of the augmentation? If you're trying to enable, a soldier to lift a load, there's no, I don't see the conflict there. I think it really comes down to what your purpose is in augmenting the human.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I want to thank everyone for their questions. We're going to end with one last question for our panelists, and it's the traditional VLab question, apparently, for advice for entrepreneurs who may want to enter the space. Let's see, we'll start in the middle. We'll start with Neil, and I'll randomly pick someone after Neil.
Well, I think it's interesting. It's a great question. I wish I heard it a long time ago, because I've done many different technologies, and I think some with some success, some that we've learned some lessons. But I think there's a lot of really interesting technologies. There's always something coming around, and I've driven my career not by what's going to get me the Learjet or anything like that. It's really driven around serving the most people, helping the most people, and developing some new technology. So, that's worked out well for me. But I think that maybe temper it with the idea that what's it going to take to get it to help the most people. I would say so. So looking at it from very cool technology is always a first starter. But then, taking a look at what's it really going to solve, and what's it going to take to get into those people's hands, I think.
Jeremy?
I would say, for me personally, being a business owner back on the East Coast where I was, I wanted something that was tangible. And as an entrepreneur, prosthetics was the most tangible thing that you could get out there. You have a patient that comes in a wheelchair and walks out the door on their own 2 feet. So ultimately, if the technologies that are out there, go out there, do something that you love. They always say you do something you love, you'll end up making money at it sometime, but do something that's tangible, that makes you happy. go for the technology that we're all out there looking for right now, and you'll be successful.
Great. Shaheen.
I would say think big, partner with the best, whether it's co-founders, engineers, marketing people, design people, investors, and third is don't give up.
Never give up.
Great. Peter, you get the last word.
I would say listen to your customers, really understand the problem you're trying to solve, and don't lie to yourself because you think your technology is what you want to solve it with. You have to be honest with yourself about the problem. I think the other part, I'm going to actually make it the second last word, because I think don't give up is the most important thing. Don't give up and focus on your milestones. If you make it to your next milestone, you invariably will have to reevaluate how you get to the next one, and that's how you build a company milestone by milestone. You don't build it on the fourth milestone.
So before turning it back to Jean, let's please join me in thanking our panelists.